Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
This is not a drill.
Repeat, this is not a drill.
Is that all you got?
Let's begin now.
What up? Oh, for sure.
Hello everybody. That should be us live across multiple platforms. Hello everybody. Right, I'm live across about 5 or 6 different platforms right now. If you can on TikTok, you can just see a green screen behind me. Whereas people on other platforms, they will be able to see what's behind me and everything that I will be talking about. They will obviously, but I'll explain what it is I'm going to be talking about. This is basically, you're seeing the live stream. You're seeing sort of a behind the scenes of my live stream tonight. Hello everybody. I just want to check that I am live on everywhere that I should be, and I think I am. I think that's it. Hi everybody. Nobody's talking about Prince Andrew anymore, are they? Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that nobody's talking about Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell for the last few weeks? That's just, poof, that's flown off the front pages, wasn't it? Thanks everybody in the, I can see everybody in the chat. And well, okay, I think I'm set up here. I think I can talk about what I'm going to talk about. Because I need to talk about the latest on Ukraine. Now, I just want to clear something up, really, with what's going on over in Ukraine, because I just want to make sure that everybody understands that what I'm doing is nothing pro-Putin. It's nothing pro-Russian propaganda or anything like that. I'm not a Putin apologist, or it's just the truth. That's all it is. It's just looking at history and being objective and looking at the objective truth of things. And that's all I try to do. I might get stuff wrong. Last week in the live stream, I mentioned a couple of times that Nord Stream 2 was an oil pipeline. Obviously, I know it's a gas pipeline, and it was just a slip of the tongue. But those sort of things I'll get wrong from time to time, and I'm sure you'll forgive me for that. If I do get anything wrong, it's literally just because, yeah, it's an honest mistake, and hopefully that's good enough for everybody. All right, what I want to talk about is obviously the Ukraine crisis tonight in this live stream. Let me just make sure I'm centered on this other video here. Okay, yeah, I need to talk about Ukraine because it's escalating pretty quickly. This is a tweet that Rishi Sunak put out on February the 28th, which I think was what is yesterday, wasn't it? So Rishi Sunak is obviously the guy at number 11 Downing Street, the Chancellor. He says, in conjunction with our allies, I'm taking immediate steps to impose new financial sanctions on the central bank of Russia. And this is a big thing. We will continue to support the Ukrainian people in bringing this unjust war to an end, he says. This is kind of massive. It's huge. They've essentially cut Russia off from the global banking system. They've cut it off from the SWIFT system. And this is from Forbes. You can't actually see this if you're on TikTok. Sorry. It says Visa, MasterCard suspend services to Russian banks hit by sanctions. So it's not just the SWIFT payment system. It's Visa, it's MasterCard. It's all sorts of things. Now, I can imagine, well, we'll go into that in a little bit. In Forbes, they said this: MasterCard and Visa have blocked a number of Russian institutions from their payment networks in compliance with Western sanctions, the companies announced Monday and Tuesday, as they pledge to work with regulators to enforce any future restrictions amid a plummeting ruble and run on the Russian banks. Obviously, the Russian banking system is under extreme strain because of this, and markets have been very volatile, extremely volatile today as a result. Now, I'll come back to this a little bit later. I'll come back to this part of what they've done. They're essentially trying to do with Russia what they do with everybody else, with Venezuela, with Iran, etc. It didn't work with Venezuela and Iran. They want the end game here is to effect regime change because you're crushing the people of the country. You're making it so, yeah, you're trying desperately to make their economy scream, which is what John Bolton, I think, said was the idea with Iran. They're doing the same sort of thing now with Russia. But Russia's a much bigger economy, can take a much bigger hit than Iran and Venezuela. And in Iran and Venezuela, the regime change didn't really work there. So with regards to stopping the war, etc., I don't know what's going to happen there. But this is quite massive, what they've done. There's no doubt about it. They've also blocked, YouTube have also blocked RT and Sputnik as well, as I did a little video on TikTok. And that's pretty huge. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. But this is Ursula von der Leyen, the EU president, and this is basically her announcing what they're going to do with regards to the sanctions, because not only have they done all this and blocked RT, they're blocking RT and Sputnik in the European Union as well, and shutting down airspace. This is quite kind of huge.
European Union steps up once more its support for Ukraine and the sanctions against the aggressor that is Putin's Russia. For the first time ever, the European Union will finance the purchase and delivery of weapons and other equipment to a country that is under attack. This is
so that's if you didn't hear Ursula there, she said for the first time ever, the EU are sending weapons to a country that is under attack. So they're sending weapons to Ukraine.
A watershed moment. We are shutting down the EU airspace for Russians. So let me be very clear. Our airspace will be closed to every Russian plane, and that includes the private jets of oligarchs.
So they've shut down the EU airspace to every Russian plane, including oligarchs.
In another unprecedented step, we will ban in the European Union the Kremlin's media machine.
And she's saying she's going to ban the Kremlin's media machine.
The state-owned Russia Today and Sputnik, as well as their subsidiaries, will no longer be able to spread their lies to justify Putin's war and to sow division in our union.
So she said they'll no longer be able to spread their lies to justify Putin's war. I will come back to this
later on. We welcome with open arms those Ukrainians who have to flee from Putin's bombs, and I'm proud of the warm welcome that Europeans have given them. We are mobilizing every effort and every euro to support our eastern member states to host and take care of these refugees.
So there you go. That's the statement from Ursula von der Leyen. Like I say, this is escalating quite quickly. It's fair to say. YouTube said it was blocking Russia's state-run today. I've just said Sputnik and Sputnik as well. I know people who work at RT and Sputnik. Friends. I've got friends who work there. I've done work for RT myself in the past, although I haven't for quite some time. So basically, if you get paid by RT in the UK, I think they've pretty much made it impossible for you to get paid via normal methods. Because I know when I got paid through the Swift IBAN system. So I don't know. They've pretty much taken them off the air. I mean, they're not going to be able to pay anybody in the countries that they're in, not with fiat currency anyway. It's not just that. FIFA and UEFA have both suspended the Russian teams from international football as well. This is from yesterday. FIFA and UEFA have suspended Russia's national teams and clubs from international football until further notice due to the country's invasion of Ukraine. The move makes it likely that Russia will be excluded from the World Cup and this year's and the Women's Euro 2020 tournament. It's incredible, isn't it? That this is, as my friend Ahmad Caballo says on Twitter. Okay, so any moment Saudi Arabia are going to be banned from the World Cup for bombing children in Yemen, right? Right? Any moment Saudi Arabia are going to be kicked out of the football tournament of the World Cup for chopping up Jamal Khashoggi, a journalist, right? It's the hypocrisy here. Can you see why it's so frustrating when you know both sides of the story here? Because you can see that both sides almost are acting ludicrously. Carlos Latuff, the great artist, said this on Twitter: FIFA suspends Russia because of their war in Ukraine. Was the US suspended from the World Cup for invading Iraq? What about Afghanistan? Were the British and the US, were we kicked out of football tournaments for invading Afghanistan? These countries that didn't attack us. What about Libya? What about Libya? When we attacked Libya and got the regime change that we wanted in Libya, and had that sharp object inserted up Gaddafi's behind. Cue to Hillary Clinton saying, "We came, we saw, we died, hee-ha." When we did that, we didn't face any sanctions from UEFA or FIFA, did we? Interesting. Has Saudi Arabia ever been suspended by FIFA for bombing Yemen? Has Israel ever been suspended by FIFA for bombing Gaza? No, it's strangely enough, Israel haven't, and they play in the European Football League. Go figure that out. It's a great cartoon that Carlos did back in 2017 when FIFA decided not to speak out about Israeli football teams based in the settlements in Palestinian territories. They chose not to talk out about that, but they'll ban Russia. Can you see how there's a false equivalency here, isn't there? There's two sets of rules. This is from Mint Press News. I strongly condemn Russia's attack on Ukraine, says Uncle Sam, as he swept Somalia and Iraq and Syria and Libya underneath the carpet, with the Western media just focusing on what Uncle Sam says and not the dead bodies under the carpet, Here's another one. Uncle Sam. The annexation of Crimea, the Russian attack on Ukraine, these are unprovoked, unjustified attacks. That's what Uncle Sam's saying, but then on the right-hand side, the annexation of Golan Heights, Israel's attack on Gaza. No, those were self-defense. This is put out by the Chinese embassy in Russia. And when you've got these sort of facts behind you, you don't need propaganda, do you? Of the wars launched between 1945 and 2001, 81%. That's 201 out of 248 armed conflicts occurring in 153 regions across the world. 81% were initiated by America. I love this meme. I wish you could see this meme on TikTok. It sums it all up, really. But if you listen to Western media, they won't talk about NATO. You've got Jerry there smacking the dog with a plank of wood as he's sleeping, and the dog being Russia, and then passing the plank over to Ukraine, who is Jerry, and then NATO runs off. Sorry, he passes it over to Tom, who is Ukraine. It's brilliant. It sums it up perfectly. Being used. I showed this the other day. It's incredible, isn't it? The bombing list of America since 1945. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's like 30 or 40 countries on there that America have bombed. And these are countries that didn't attack them since 1945. And at no point were America banned from the banking system. At no point were they banned from FIFA. At no point were they banned from the World Cup. At no point did they face any sanctions whatsoever for any of these wars. None of them. These are wars based on lies that have displaced millions of people, created millions of refugees the world over, absolutely destroyed countries, destroyed them. In the case of Libya, just opened slave markets, whereas under Gaddafi it was the richest country in Africa. Now there's open slave markets. Saudi Arabia aren't sanctioned for the war on Yemen. You know, this is another one from China, by the way. It's another, you know, I saw on the BBC, they were saying, why doesn't China help out here with Russia? Why are China? It's like, they would be saying that if they only give half the story, though, which is what they do. What about Syria? I mean, I've mentioned Yemen a few times. What about Syria? There's a war right now going on in Syria. I say war going on right now in Syria. It's been going on for almost a decade. A dirty war by the West. Another regime change war that we're trying to inflict regime change with Assad. You know, America are illegally occupying 30% of Syria right now. Did you know that? You know, you're talking about Russia occupying Ukraine. Well, America are occupying Syria right now. You know, do you remember when Iraq told them to go out, to get out of their country? Do you remember when they said we have to go into Iraq because we need to sow the seed of democracy? And years later, after the country was again devastated, it actually it's got a democracy now. And they said to America, please, can you get out of our country, when they murdered Soleimani? And America said no. How is that respecting anybody's sovereignty? Then there's the Golan Heights. I mean, if you don't know what the Golan Heights is, go and have a look at it. The Golan Heights is territory between Israel and Syria. And during the 1967 war, Syria basically annexed large swathes of land. When you talk about what Ukraine did with those, what Russia did with Ukraine. I mean, in 1967, they took out massive territory in Egypt. And the Golan Heights. Golan Heights is rich in natural gas. America and Israel are stealing that gas. They're still occupying the Golan Heights illegally. They have been now for 50 years over. It's occupied territory, it's Syrian territory, and the Golan Heights, Israel, steal and sell the gas. And do you know who's got the contract to mine that gas, to get the gas out the ground and sell it? A company called Genie Energy. And two people on that board, among other people, are a Rothschild and Rupert Murdoch. Did you know that? Did people know that? I don't see Israel being kicked out of the World Cup or UEFA, do you? I don't see any sanctions on Israel whatsoever. Apartheid Israel, let's not forget. You know, we back Israel as it's occupying Palestine illegally, stealing land every single day, bombing it regular. Their generals talk about mowing the lawn every once in a while, when they're talking about carpet bombing the Gaza Strip. They've never faced sanction. Why? If you're going to do it to Russia, you've got to be consistent, otherwise all bets are off, aren't they? If you're playing in a game where the one side are playing, you're playing by rules, and everybody else, the one side is making you play by the rules, yet the other side is flagrantly just abusing those rules and forgetting them altogether, then you're just not going to play, are you? You're not going to play by those rules. You're just going to go away. You're going to take your ball. You're going to go elsewhere. Listen, Russia are guilty of a crime here. There's no doubt about it. They're guilty of a crime. They've attacked a country that didn't attack them. Even those guilty of that crime will agree. And I can't believe I'm showing this, but here's Condoleezza Rice, one of the architects of the Iraq War, saying just that. Listen.
Well, and I have argued that when you invade a sovereign nation, that is a war crime. I mean, I think we're at just a real basic...
For those on TikTok at the moment who can't hear me, by the way, this is a Condoleezza Rice the other day on one of the Sunday morning shows, and I'll say what the presenter says to her.
Well, and I have argued that when you invade a sovereign nation, that is a war crime.
Somebody's just said, well, I argue when you invade a sovereign nation, that is a war crime. She's correct. And then it moves over to Condoleezza Rice and she nods. Yes. Condoleezza Rice, architect of the Iraq War.
At just a real basic point there.
Well, I'd agree. It is certainly against every principle of international law and international order.
Well, and
Condoleezza Rice saying it goes against international law. There you go. So, like I say, Russia are guilty here. I'm not diminishing what they're doing. You know, I am against what they're doing here. But let's have an honest conversation as to why they're doing what they're doing. And let's have an honest conversation about how they think that they can get away with this. Because if we weren't, and the West weren't doing this over and over again over the last decades, would they be even thinking about this, Russia? You know? You've got to ask that question, haven't you? What Russia are guilty of here, if you actually think about it, in Ukraine, and as I say, I'm not diminishing what they're doing. People are dying over there in Ukraine right now. But they're not even guilty of 1% of what the UK, US are guilty of over the last 50, 60, 70 years, are they? Let's face it. You know, let's just go back and look. Afghanistan was what? Weeks ago. It wasn't even years ago, Afghanistan. Or months ago. It was weeks. You could count it in weeks. And we were murdering civilians. The Americans were murdering civilians as they left. You know? Do you remember when they said that they killed that guy with a drone strike and he was a terrorist and he was going to bomb the airport? No. He was on the way to the airport with his family because he'd got a visa and the US bombed him with a drone. Killed him, an innocent guy who's actually hoping to go and live in America. That was weeks ago. Why aren't the US banned from the UEFA and FIFA World Cup? Do you remember a couple of years ago when the US, assassinated Soleimani? Do you remember that? What's up with that? Russia aren't even 1% guilty of what we've been guilty in the past. You could maybe make an argument, okay, they've gone 10% as far as the UK and the US in the past. And look what has happened. Look what has happened. They've been banned from football. They've been banned from the financial system. Their people in the country can't even send money abroad now or get money in. They can't deal abroad. Businesses can't deal abroad with other businesses. They've totally shut them off from the financial system because they did what? 1% of what America has done? We're meant to be all playing by the same rules. It's the global system. It's what the Americans and the British call an international rules-based order. Well, you're making a mockery of it, aren't you? This international rules-based order. Because you're telling to everybody else in the world, you have to play by these rules, but meanwhile you're flagrantly ignoring them. For instance, you're standing up for the rights of journalists all the world over. The UK and US are, aren't they? You can't jail journalists. You can't torture journalists. That's wrong. That's against the international rules-based order. Well, right now we're torturing a journalist, Julian Assange, and we have done for 3 years in Belmarsh Prison in the middle of London. He's there without charge. He's on remand. He's committed no crime whatsoever in this country. He's in solitary confinement, and he's got rapists and murderers and terrorists as his cellmates. If we're doing that to journalists in this country and the US are making us do it, how can we point fingers anywhere else in the world and say, oh, look, Saudi Arabia chopped up the journalist in Turkey? We can't. This international rules-based order is nonsense, isn't it? Especially when you consider what America do with and the UK as well with regards to the financial rules. The rules don't apply to the UK, the US and NATO. But the UK, US and NATO are expecting the rest of the world to abide by those rules. Would you? If you were in that situation, would you? This, look, actually, I'm going to come back to that picture. That's a before and after picture of Iraq, before democracy I was showing there for people on TikTok who can't see what's behind me. This weaponization of the global financial system is not good for anybody. This is a massive economy that you've just shut out of the system. This is not Iran or Venezuela like they've done to before, which is a tiny little economy compared to Russia, which I think is the 10th or 11th right now largest economy in the world. The thing is with Venezuela and Iran, they're not self-sufficient countries. They rely heavily on export. Russia isn't like that. It's self-sufficient. And is energy sufficient. In fact, it's an energy exporter. It's still going to be able to export to other countries like China. And what's it going to get? It's going to get rubles, because that's its currency. And now, with its exports to China, it's going to get more rubles for its oil than it was beforehand. So although everybody's cooing right now over a financial crash in Russia, I'm not a wizard or anything like that with financials, but I'm just thinking, hey, it seems very much to me like a domino has been knocked over here by Biden and the UK and the West. It seems like they've knocked a domino over, and this is just going to lead who knows where. But it's not going to be good, and I think it's going to have huge consequences for everybody, even us here. I don't think they have a clue what they've just done. It seems to me like they're desperate and frantic. Don't really know what they're doing other than, oh, we know how to be a bully, and that's about it. I just want to now remind you of who we're supporting here. Because they're not the best of people, these aren't, that we're supporting. And I've seen some interviews of people in that region, of spokespeople, who, I've got to be honest, are just plain racist. These people are racist. And these are the spokespeople for this movement. Well, you might have seen this from the BBC. I'm about to show a clip from the BBC. And they're interviewing a guy over there, and he's about to say why it's emotional for him.
Me, I'm sorry. It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with...
He says we see children with blonde hair and blue eyes being killed every day. Play it again.
Me, I'm sorry. It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day.
With blue hair and blonde hair and blue eyes being killed, and it's very emotional for him. Let's play it again.
Me, I'm sorry. It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles and his helicopters. And
now I want you to see this, and I hope I want you to hear how this is on the BBC. This clip is, and Ross Atkins is the interviewer. And watch how Ross Atkins here apologises for racism. And he doesn't say, I'm sorry to the viewers for this racist person I'm interviewing. No. He makes out that that person is not being racist when he says, people with blonde hair and blue eyes are being killed. It's not like brown people in Yemen.
His rockets.
And so, of course, I understand and respect the emotion. What you are outlining there is this tension between longer-term efforts to apply pressure to Vladimir Putin, such as financial sanctions, and the very immediate military threat which you're experiencing.
No, Ross, that's not what he was outlining there. Well, it may be what he was outlining in there, but isn't it more important as a journalist that, I don't know, you focus on the fact that the person that you're interviewing is a racist piece of shit? I mean, shouldn't you really follow up a question on that? What do you mean by blonde hair and blue eyes? What do you mean by blonde hair and blue eyes? Do you mean like, you know, when brown people with brown hair and brown eyes get bombed, it's not... it's par for the course and, you know, they're savages? Do you mean that? This is kind of incredible that I'm seeing this on the BBC from a BBC reporter getting, I reckon, probably 6 figures. I'll go and check it, but I bet you he's getting 6 figures a year, that guy. And he's apologising for racism and racists. I don't know quite how they are getting away with this, really. I want to show you this that's going on over there at the moment as well, because it's important that people understand this. It's an area of the world where racism and racist actions take place more, it looks like, than it does, which is way too much anyway, over here. Now listen to this person on, this is a great video on TikTok. I think this will be helpful, actually. Listen to this.
Jewel Gang, Africans and Caribbeans are being denied at the Poland border to leave Ukraine safely. They are prioritizing white people and forcing Africans and Caribbeans to stay while they get to leave Ukraine safely.
Did you see it? Did you hear that? They're prioritizing white people as they're leaving, and they're forcing the Africans to stay. There's pictures to back it up. I've seen this on...
Jewel Gang, Africans and Caribbeans are being denied at the Poland border to leave Ukraine safely. They are prioritizing white people and forcing Africans and Caribbeans to stay while they get to leave Ukraine safely. This is sick and inhumane. There are women and children with their babies that they are denying access to safety.
These are the black community. We are not allowing any black people to enter inside the gates.
I have some information that can be very helpful and resourceful to people trying to exit Ukraine. So I need y'all to please boost this video as much as possible. I'm getting ready to post them right now. Okay, so here are some numbers I found that can be of assistance.
So I'm not going to show that because I haven't vetted those numbers. I don't know whether they're, you know, maybe you want to check them out. I don't know. So that's up to you. Adil Ray, I think his name is, on is it Good Morning Britain? He talked about this, and credit to him. I've been critical of this guy in the past, but credit to him for talking about that video that I just showed you. You're gonna hear him talk about it here.
A country desperately trying to flee, but they won't let you into Poland because of the colour of your skin, is the allegations that are being made, which is absolutely disgusting, if that is the case.
For those on TikTok that can't hear this, Adil Ray saying there's allegations that people on that border aren't being let into Poland because of the colour of their skin. So that's playing into it as well. This humanitarian crisis is being caused, and it's being exacerbated. I'll play the rest of this video.
And let's not forget as well, and I do say this, and I think it's absolutely right that we feel for the people in Ukraine because it feels closer to home, that's in Europe. But between the Belarus and Polish border right now, there are still Afghan and Syrian refugees who are stuck. They're trapped there. Poland won't let them in. Between the
Belarus and Poland border, there's still Afghan refugees over there now as well. And Poland won't let them in. You can see how this is just a tinderbox now going ready to fly. Oh, it could catch fire. Well, it has catch fire. There's a war.
Poland are building a wall, and Belarus won't let them back in.
Poland are building a wall. Yeah, because it works so well for Trump.
Children there dying of hypothermia, and we do know that there are wars happening all around this world. And let's just hope one thing that comes out of this, we realise how much this feels to us because it's close to home, that now we start feeling that empathy for people in Yemen, in Syria, in Palestine, across the whole world, because now we feel what it's like to be on the edge of a war.
Well, that's our main news.
That was pretty good by him, Adil. He summed up the situation over there pretty good. That's something, you know, people don't realise that this is an area world where there's already a hell of a lot of refugees and problems as it is, and this is just adding to them. You know, he's better than most. I'll say that. Adil Ray on Good Morning Britain he's on, because I'm going to show you some examples now of it can only be described as racist reporting. This it can only be, and there's tons of it. There really is.
And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
It's really emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
These are not refugees from Syria. These are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. I mean, that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar.
Sorry, the audio on this is very.
But this
quiet.
Isn't a place, with all due respect.
This guy, I did a video about this guy on TikTok, and he's got like 2 million views or something. It's incredible.
You know, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. You know, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European. I have to choose those.
Did you hear him? Relatively civilized, relatively European, he said, the Ukrainians. Relatively civilized, relatively relatively European, he said.
Seen conflict raging for decades. You know, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European. I have to choose those words carefully too.
Altogether, there are about 200 students, Zambian students, trying to get out of Poland. No one's letting them through. They've spent 2 nights, and this is going to be the second night out in the cold, and no one has helped them.
And they've got no support. And this is not a...
Give you some idea of what's going on there with that last one. But I mean, there are so many examples of this. There's just so many examples. This is the French. Look, you can see that translation there.
Parce que ça va être une question importante. Et
We're
je
not
parle
talking
pas
about
là de
Syrians
Syriens
fleeing
qui
bombs,
fuient les bombardements du
We're
régime
not
syrien
talking
soutenu
about
par
Syrians
Vladimir
fleeing
Poutine. On parle
bombs
d'Européens
of the
qui
Syrian
partent à leur
regime
voiture, qui
backed
ressemblent à
by
nos
Putin.
voitures,
We're
qui prennent la
talking
route
about
et qui essayent juste de sauver leur vie, quoi.
leaving
Et ça,
their
c'est une question
cars
qui va être
that look
importante pour
like
l'Europe.
ours
Parce que
to
ça va être une
save their
question
lives. Because, you know, in brown countries, where it's uncivilized, war's expected, you know? That's what the inference is there, isn't it? That's what he's basically saying. Well, I'm showing a picture right now of Iraq before democracy and after democracy. There's a reason these countries are war-torn. There's a reason these countries, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc., as the guy said there, you know, less civilized nations, there's a reason they are war-torn. Because America and us, the UK and sometimes NATO, etc., and other countries along with them, but mostly America, have been illegally and unconstitutionally bombing them for decades based on lies and fabrications. I think this is Aleppo. I think that's Aleppo. I mean, I'm showing a picture of before and after of Aleppo right now, people, on TikTok, and I think that's Aleppo. They say how, like, you know, these countries in the Middle East are backwards, etc., and they're, you know, you saw there how the one guy was saying how they're war torn and trying to say that they're all trying to, you know, the inference was that they were uncivilized. I've got to tell you something. Syria, before the Syrian war, I think in 2010, Damascus itself, rather, was one of the most visited cities on the planet. Damascus. Its history goes back decades, with Aleppo, which is just an absolute, you know, bomb site now. But Damascus and all the religious and all the artifacts and everything back there, it was one of the most visited cities in the world. Since the regime change war that has been waged by America, and if you want evidence of that, just go and look up. It's on Wikipedia. Go look. Operation Timber Sycamore. That was Obama's, CIA's wonderful idea to get rid of Assad in Syria. These countries are only war-torn because we have been bombing the crap out of them. And I think it's, as I've pretty much demonstrated, I think it's really hypocritical to be saying to Russia, and like I say, I'm condemning Russia for what they're doing. I think it's awful. They're attacking civilian targets by the look of it. That's the reports anyway, although we're not getting much report from the ground, so I tend to take everything I hear with a pinch of salt. But it's not a good situation over there. However, it's some fraction of what we've been guilty of in the past, and we weren't booted out of the World Cup, were we? We weren't sanctioned. We never sanctioned Israel, even though it's an apartheid state, and even their own human rights organisation in Israel agrees. We're still supporting the war in Yemen. There wouldn't be a plane in the sky over Yemen if it wasn't for our support. Why aren't we banned from the World Cup? Why haven't we been sanctioned? Why haven't we had... why isn't the BBC being banned in the EU as well? This is what our Foreign Secretary is saying. I'm like, I want to be as nice as possible to this woman, to Liz Truss. She's the butt of many jokes, I think, and that can't be nice for her. And I don't want to be nasty or critical, but I will just say this. What is it saying to the rest of the world that we've got Liz Truss as our Foreign Secretary? Are we saying to the rest of the world, yeah, we're not really taking you serious and we don't give a shit really about what you think? Because that's what I think it is. I mean, she went over to... I did a live stream about this last week. She went over to Russia and basically just read a statement, and when they came back at her with a question, she read the statement again, so they decided to ask her another question, and then for some reason she decided to say that the Russians didn't have autonomy over Russian territory. And now here she is. Well, listen to this. Listen to what she said. I think this is yesterday on the BBC, or Sunday on the BBC, Sunday morning. It's just incredible, this is.
Zelensky has asked for people from abroad to join an international force. Would you support that? I do.
So she says Zelensky, the Ukrainian, has asked for foreigners to join an international force. Would you suggest British people join that force? And listen to this loopy. Don't be critical.
Zelensky has asked for people from abroad to join an international force. Would you support that? I do support that. And of course, that is something that people can make their own decisions about. But they are fighting, the people of Ukraine are fighting for freedom and democracy, not just for Ukraine, but for the whole of Europe, because that is what President Putin is challenging. And absolutely, if people want to support that struggle, I would support them in doing that.
So you support Britain, people from Britain, going over to Ukraine to help in the fight?
Absolutely, if that's what they want to do.
Zelensky has asked for people.
Can I just point to something? Look at the comment there. Look at the top comment. That's my missus. I'd go, she said, but I'm not vaccinated. You're funny. So yeah, she's basically saying, yeah. So if you're in the UK and you're double jammed, presumably you're going to be double jammed, because otherwise going over there going to the Ukraine to fight the war against Russia would be too much of a health risk if you're not vaccinated. But still, it's okay for them to go over and fight with Nazis. Because this is many of the factions over there fighting against Russia in eastern Ukraine are neo-Nazis, the Azov Battalion. These are the people that, were backed. These are the people who were fighting Russian forces. Mostly, and have been for 7 or 8 years. 14,000 people died in that region. Kind of incredible, isn't it? 14,000 people since the coup in 2014. The point of this part of the stream was for me to just lay the groundwork down to just say, listen, we're in a giant glass house here, throwing stones all over the place if we're kicking Russia out the World Cup for invading a sovereign nation. We've been guilty of this our entire history. America have been guilty of it for their entire history. I can't remember a year where America weren't at war with somebody. It might have happened in the last 30, 40 years, let me know. But I bet you it's only 1 or 2. Why haven't they been banned from the World Cup? Why haven't they been sanctioned? If you're going to talk about a global rules-based order, you should play by the rules yourself. Hope isn't lost over in Ukraine. This is Kim.com on Twitter. This is his recipe for peace in Ukraine, and it's brilliant. It's not just brilliant, it makes sense. It's logical. He says, number one, Ukraine accepts to be a neutral and not join NATO. This could have all been avoided if they'd have just said, NATO would have just said, yeah, NATO, don't worry, Ukraine will never be part of NATO. In fact, NATO is going to talk about disbanding, actually, because there's no real need for it since the breakup of the Soviet Union. I can't see why it's been expanded to include 13 more countries in 4 or 5 different ways, right up to the border of Russia. Really, that's what needed to be done. But if Ukraine accepted to be neutral and not to join NATO, that would probably be enough. And then number two, Ukraine accepts the referendums for independence of regions with vast majority Russian ethnicity, of which they're in the Donbass areas. Lugansk, I think, was one, and Donetsk was the other one. Number three, Ukraine accepts the strategic importance of Crimea and its military base to Russia. Yeah, everybody says, oh, he invaded Crimea in 2014. Putin. Well, I mean, they don't talk about the fact that there was a referendum, that it's a vastly majority of them speak Russian. It's a vastly majority Russian-speaking area. And there was a referendum before it was annexed. And it was only annexed after the United States-led coup had ousted the president. We'll get to that a little bit later. Number four, he says, Russia and the US stop influencing democratic processes in Ukraine, allowing for free and open elections without interference. Absolutely. And it needs to be both sides here, Russia and America. You know, I talk about America doing it all over the world. That's just because people screamed Russiagate for 4 years. And I'm like, hold on a minute. This is America, the world champions at messing about in foreign elections. You know, they're the undisputed kings of the world. And they're all of a sudden they're going, oh, Russiagate. Give me a break, you know. So we need to stop interfering in those elections. Number five, Russia pays a fair share to Ukraine for using its territory to transit natural gas and oil. Yes, of course, that pipeline has a huge effect that's going through Ukraine from Russia to Europe right now. There are 2 pipelines. There's that one going through Ukraine and one going through the Baltic Sea. That's Nord Stream 1. And then the other, Nord Stream 2, would have doubled that capacity, but obviously that's not going ahead now. But how often do they talk about oil on the TV when they're explaining the Ukraine crisis? Number 6, Kim says, Russia accepts the right of Ukraine to join the EU. I don't see why Russia should have a problem with them joining the EU, to be honest. Especially now, because I think the EU is probably going to collapse in the next few years. Certainly, I would say there's a much better chance of that happening than it being a powerhouse. So yeah, you can join EU if you want. Don't. And lastly, he says Russia pays reparations for damages caused by the invasion and supports Ukraine to achieve its full potential, just as Ukraine supports Russia's desire for a neutral Ukraine, which is not a threat to Russia. This is reasonable. End the war. I happen to agree on that. Agree with it because it follows the ethos of, well, it follows the thoughts of a very intelligent person when it comes to war, and that's this guy. Julian Assange. If wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by the truth. That's why I do this. To try and get to the truth and to give you the truth, because you're not getting it at the moment if you're looking at the BBC. Well, I say at the moment, you haven't got it for years, actually. Okay. That's the first part of Ukraine I want to talk about tonight. I've had a couple of super chats come in, I noticed, so just bear me a second. Thank you for the super chats, everybody. I'll have to, you know what, I'll come to the super chats at the end, if you don't mind, because I'm going to have to go into, I'm going to have to open a browser and go in that way, and I don't want to open the browser because I've got a million things open right now, and I don't want to overload my computer and it crash, and you'll be looking at a blank screen. The first casualty of war is the truth, says Badgerface on TikTok. Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Thank you so much for speaking the truth. I appreciate it. Thank you, Hamut Salothman. Thank you very much. I'll carry on with this, and I'll come to the super chats and the questions at the end, because I've got quite a bit actually I want to talk about tonight. Let's just get set up for the next part of the next bit that I want to talk about. All right, open all bookmarks. Okay, I've just opened all bookmarks on my computer, and so that probably slowed everything down right now, and the button's gone red and I'm stuttering, so I'm just going to wait for everything to open up and not touch anything, and hope that I don't crash my computer and ruin this live stream. I stupidly opened all the tabs I needed to open then, all at once, and now my computer's juddering. I think we're okay. We're all right. Phew! Okay, we're good. I need to give people an explainer and some backstory on Ukraine. Now, I did this the other day, but I want to talk about Ukraine and the goings on over there over the past few years, because this war didn't start last week. This war started quite some time ago, actually. Probably 2 decades ago, if we're honest. That's how far it really goes back. You need to... Yeah, sorry about that. That's the... Okay. First of all, you've got to understand NATO's expansion. To understand what's going on in Ukraine at the moment, you've got to understand what the Russian side of things is. And the Russia side of things is, listen, there's no need for NATO. The Soviet Union was broken up back in 1990. The end of the Cold War happened. The end of the Cold War might have happened, but then a hybrid war started, in my opinion. But you can see there the expansion from NATO, from this image behind me. NATO membership, you can see all the countries that have, you know, these are the founders from 1949, but then look from 1950 to 2000, you can see the added countries. But then just recently, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all these countries are like right up on Russia's border, and then Ukraine even more so. Then you've got all the goings on in Georgia, and obviously Poland joining NATO as well. This expansion is it's expansion of aggression. It's aggressive. You know, I try and explain it this way. If you had a house, if say you've got a house and you walk down to the end of your garden one day, and at the bottom of your garden there's a new neighbour. The old neighbour's been ousted in a coup, sorry. The old neighbour's sold his house, and then a new neighbour's come in. And this new neighbour has brought some of his friends along. And his friends are looking where, well, we can put them there. It's like, what's going on? What are you doing? Oh, we're just figuring out where we're going to put the missiles at the bottom of your neighbour's garden. What missiles? Oh, the defensive nuclear missiles. Defensive nuclear missiles? Yeah. Just the nuclear missile. So, you know, if you attack this country, we can nuke you. What? Who decided this? Oh, this NATO place. Yeah, there's loads of houses in the streets that have all got missiles now pointed at you. You would have something to say about it, wouldn't you? This expansion of NATO, you would have something to say about it. So you've got to understand that. And if you're listening to anybody that's talking about the Ukraine, Russia goings on at the moment, and they haven't mentioned to you NATO, like Ross Adkins didn't in his 3-minute explain on Ukraine the other day, which is incredible. Stop listening to them, because they're obviously only giving you one side of the story. I was explaining this the other day, I think, in a live stream. You know, if you only get half the information, you're going to get a wildly different view on that story, aren't you? If you don't get... Look at Cinderella, for instance, the story of Cinderella, as I explained the other day. If you don't explain, oh no, Cinderella had a wish and she turned into a pumpkin at 12 o'clock and there was a glass slipper and everything, and she left the glass slipper behind. If you don't explain that part of the story, then Prince Charming, who is the hero in that story, is just a nutcase with a bit of a foot fetish, going around touching everybody's feet, trying to get the shoe to fit. What are you doing, man? Do you know what I mean? You need to explain the whole story for people to get the right idea about it. And if you don't explain NATO when you're trying to talk about the Ukraine-Russia crisis, then you're doing your audience a disservice and you're lying to them by omission. Then there's Nord Stream 2, as I explained. There are 2 pipelines going through from Russia through Ukraine into Europe. That's one. Ukraine gets something called transit payments for the flow of that gas. Sorry, not oil. And the other one, Nord Stream 1, goes through the Baltic Sea. And you can see there, it goes from the Baltic Sea from Russia through the Baltic Sea to Germany. And obviously, there's no transit payments there involved. Nord Stream 2, construction began in 2015. Halted now because of the sanctions on it. But that, I think, would have doubled the capacity up there. So that's got a huge, huge part to play in this. Because America wants to sell Europe its natural gas, which is more expensive. So making sure that Russia doesn't sell EU gas. Perfect. We're quids in, or dollars in, you know? So that's the second part you need to explain. You need to talk about if you're explaining the situation right now in Russia. And as you can see right there, over there, just below Ukraine, where you've got Crimea. If you're going to talk about Crimea, you also need to talk about the coup in 2013-2014, backed by the US and West. And the fact that Crimea has a port in the Black Sea, a deep water port. So you need to, as Kim.com explained in that tweet that I showed, it's defensively strategic. So you need to explain all that. But on top of that, you also need to explain this. And this is Victoria Nuland. And this is a speech that she gave back in, what was it, I think before the coup in Ukraine, just bragging about how much money America had pumped into Ukraine before the coup in 2013-2014. $5 billion. Listen.
It has supported Ukrainians as they build democratic skills and institutions, as they promote civic participation and good governance, all of which are preconditions for Ukraine to achieve its European aspirations. We've invested over $5 billion to assist Ukraine in these and other goals that will ensure a secure and prosperous and democratic Ukraine.
That sounds wonderful, doesn't it? They've invested $5 billion in processes to assist their, to feed a blossoming democracy become more pro-Europe, right? On the ground, doesn't quite work like that. And $5 billion is a lot of money. Remember, that's 5,000 million. That's a lot of money to invest in democratic and help with democracy in Ukraine, isn't it? In an Eastern European country. This money obviously goes to NGOs. That's what they're called. Some NGOs are all right. A non-governmental organisation. You know, acts outside of the government sphere, does good in the world, you know, charities, etc. Non-governmental organisations, they go into countries, they'll feed the homeless, etc. But some not so good, especially the ones funded by the CIA's regime change wing, the National Endowment for Democracy, and I'm sure they would have had a rather large hand in spreading that $5 billion before the coup in 2013-2014 in Ukraine. Where's that money going to? Is it going to good causes, or is it going to, extreme factions on one side or the other? Riling up tension in a country that's, a little bit fragile. Riling people up, getting them to protest. We've seen the MO elsewhere. That $5 billion, by the way, was going towards TV stations. Newspaper journalism, promoting journalism. You can guess what sort of journalism it was promoting, yeah? Wouldn't be anything objective that maybe paints Russia in a good light. Would only be something that is pro-Ukrainian government, correct? Can you see what I mean? Not all NGOs are what they say they are on the tin. This is something that they don't mention much in the media too. This 5-minute conversation Victoria Nuland had back in 2013, before the coup, before the president was ousted. There were politicians going and speaking at these protests. There were senators from America going to talk to these crowd. That's how much they were involved. The $5,000 million they've put into it, and then they're on the ground making speeches and talking to the protesters, and caught on the phone saying this. This is a 5-minute conversation. I'm going to play it all for you. This was leaked online the 4th of February 2014, and it's a conversation between Victoria Nuland, who was the United States Secretary to the EU at the time, I think the EU or Europe, and the ambassador to Ukraine. And they're admitting here that you can hear them. It's plain as day. They're picking who's going to be the next president of Ukraine before the president's left.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think, what, in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yachts is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay, good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting, and that Yachts was going to offer in that context a three-way, the 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I mean, that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where Klitschko has been the top dog, he's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got, and he's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych did that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting going on right now, and I'm sure there's a lively argument going on in that group.
So I don't think I need to show much more on that. You get the idea. You can see what sort of people these are, Group
at this point. But anyway, we could land Jelly side up on this one if we move fast. So let me.
There's a great video on YouTube I recommend. It's Oliver Stone, Ukraine on Fire. You should go and watch it if you've got an hour and a half, 2 hours, if you really want the backstory on what's going on. He lays it out perfectly. But you can see here that Victoria Nuland is like, they're picking who's going to be president and who's going to be vice president. And on the case of Klitschko, he didn't want to be in the government. I think he ended up being mayor.
Let me work on.
And they also said F the EU there. And the mainstream media over here really jumped on the F the EU bit rather than the tacit admittance that they were behind the coup. So that's 2014. So you got the Ukrainian president leaves. He goes to Russia, Yanukovych. And yeah, Ukraine, a new temporary president comes in, and then the Yatsenyuk takes over. America's guy, America's stooge, America's puppet. Joe Biden, who was vice president at that time, 2014, gets appointed, point man by Barack Obama to oversee Ukraine and to root out any corruption. He's obviously now president, just in case you're not aware, Joe Biden. He was vice president back then. So he goes into Ukraine and he's got to root out corruption. Now, one of the first ways, it seems, that corruption was weeded out in Ukraine was somehow Hunter Biden found his way onto the board of a Ukrainian energy firm, Burisma, getting $1 million a year in salary. $1 million! He'd just been booted out the army for failing a drugs test not long before. Just for, man, talk about filing upwards. So he's booted from the army. His laptop, obviously, we know all about that story. The laptop story censored by the New York Post in 2020, in the 2020 election. But it became a big thing. Hunter Biden being on the board of this energy firm. His associate in that energy firm, Hunter Biden's energy firm, was sentenced to prison for a fraud scheme. Did you know that? Devon Archer, this is from Just the News. Article is Hunter Biden's business associate was sentenced to prison for a fraud scheme. Devon Archer who's a former business partner of President Joe Biden's son, Hunter, was sentenced on Monday to just over a year in prison for defrauding a Native American tribe of $60 million in bonds. Manhattan judge Ronnie Abrams, an Obama appointee, sentenced Archer to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison for defrauding a Native American tribal entity and various investment advisory clients of more than $60 million. This is Hunter Biden's business partner. From March 2014 through to April 2016, Archer worked with others on the scheme that caused the Wackpamney, my apologies if I'm saying that wrong, Wackpamney Lake Community Corporation, a tribal entity, to issue a series of tribal bonds through lies and misrepresentations, the Department of Justice press release states. Archer, who has maintained his innocence, was ordered to pay to forfeit more than $15 million and pay over $43 million in restitution. This is some good friend, isn't it? I think he was on the board of this Burisma as well, this guy, this Devon Archer guy. I'll come to that. He will also have 1 year of supervised release after prison. There's no dispute about the harm caused to real people, Abrams said. So, Hunter Biden's business partner, I think he was on the board of Burisma. I'll come to that in a moment. He was, he was sent to prison. So it's like, there's lots of smoke there, isn't it? And then a few days ago, I come across this. There's lots of talk on the interwebs, on the internet, that Hunter Biden wasn't the only politician's son, politician's relative, on the board of Ukrainian gas companies. So I started digging into this. I thought, this is interesting, especially with the stuff I found out about Ghislaine Maxwell and, you know, the video I did on the Madeleine McCann stuff. If you don't know that, if you haven't seen that, by the way, go back and look at my videos. That'll make your hair curl. There has been a lot of talk about this. No, there's been a lot of talk that Biden, not only was his son on the board of a Ukrainian gas company, but the allegations are that not only that, but Nancy Pelosi's son as well has got dealings with them, John Kerry's son, and Mitt Romney's son as well, or relatives of them. So I started doing a little bit of digging. It's like, okay. So, you know, because obviously Joe Biden went into Ukraine, remember, to root out all the corruption. All right? And then, you know, his son gets a job at a Ukrainian energy firm. Now, he said he found out about his son's appointment on Burisma's board in the media. He said that. Yeah. Pull the other one, it's got bells on. So, these allegations have been on the internet for quite some time about Nancy Pelosi's son, about John Kerry and Mitt Romney's relatives. So, there's been fact checks done on this. Now, I did a fact check the other day, and I've noticed something with fact checks from these corporate entities. They don't seem to check any facts. So, I started to look into this. And this is the fact check from Reuters. So, I'm going to read this to you. Right? Because this is what they say about, you know, not just Hunter Biden, but also Pelosi's son and Mitt Romney's son and John Kerry's son being on. So this is what Reuters say about that claim. Post claiming that the sons of US President Joe Biden, Senator Mitt Romney, I'm not going to change it, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry, quote, are all on the board of directors for energy companies doing business in Ukraine, have been flagged by Facebook in its efforts to combat online information. This is from quite some time back, this is. The claim is false, they say. Okay? They say the claim is false. Although Biden's son Hunter previously held such a position. And I'm like, okay. Well, that's straight away, that raises a red flag for me. Because, yes, Biden's son Hunter did previously hold a position there. But you didn't really go into much depth with that, did you? Okay, so we read on. Hunter Biden says, well, we know about Hunter Biden. We know, I don't have to go over his, how he was getting $1 million, do I? I don't have to go over how he had a pay cut of 50%, literally just as Joe Biden went out the door of the vice presidency. Don't have to talk about the Joe Biden thing. We come to Nancy Pelosi's son, rather. So this is what Reuters say about the allegations that Nancy Pelosi's son is on the board of a gas company in Ukraine. Because surely if that was happening, then that's going to be bad news, isn't it? I mean, Biden was put there to stop corruption, and then all of a sudden it's like a banana republic going on. Anyway, Nancy Pelosi's son, Reuters say, according to his LinkedIn page, okay, so this is good, isn't it? Their fact check has gone straight to his LinkedIn page as to what he says his job is. This person's a criminal. Let's do a fact check on that. Are you a criminal? No. We've checked it. It's not true. According to his LinkedIn page, Paul Pelosi Jr., the only son of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is currently a manager at the phytopharmaceutical company ST Biosciences. Again, this is going back some time, so this isn't... He might not be on that board anymore. A board member of the San Francisco Shanghai Sister Company Committee here and a business development executive at the Corporate Governance Initiative. So they know about him being the business development executive on the Corporate Governance Initiative. Okay, that's good that they've mentioned that. The claim that Paul Pelosi was on the board of directors for an energy company doing business in Ukraine may stem from his time on the board of Viscoli, a US energy company based in Southern California. Okay, so he was on the board of Viscoli. That's interesting. As explained here by a PolitiFact, Viscoli, which was focused on US business, dissolved and reformed in Singapore, and we don't know who's involved in the new entity. It changed its name, but Paul Pelosi's got nothing to do with it anymore, so that's that. Can't be that, can it? Reuters could not reach Hamill for a comment. So that's it. And they say on top of that, PolitiFact, factcheck.org, Snopes, and USA Today, whose fact checks I know are devoid of checking facts, all rated the claims of Paul Pelosi's connection to a Ukrainian gas company as false. That's Reuters saying he has no connections to a Ukrainian gas company. Then they talk about John Kerry's stepsons. Okay? Former Secretary of State and current Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry has 2 daughters, Alexandra and Vanessa, and 3 stepsons. What? Oh, right, okay, 3 stepsons, so, okay. Son-in-laws, I thought stepsons were son-in-laws for some reason. Like, what? One of them's married? Is one married to all 3, or? Never mind. So, he's got 3 stepsons, so his wife's sons. Henry John Hines IV. Hines. That's a nice name, isn't it? Christopher Drake Hines and Andre Hines. You just know which... you just know it's going to be the Hines family, don't you? You just know it's going to be. As reported by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, well, that's where Hines comes from, Pittsburgh. Yeah. They're like a box of rats. Henry John Hines has maintained the lowest public profile, and he's a blacksmith. All right, so it's not going to be him. Christopher Hines currently serves on Hines Endowment's board of directors, according to the Centre of New York, New American, blah, blah, blah. And they say, okay, so it's not him. Andre Hines is an environmentalist and the current chairman of Hines Endowments and co-founder of a sustainable energies fund, technologies fund. So they say it's not him. They say, Reuters, that claims that a son of John Kerry, or stepson, is involved in a Ukrainian energy company, likely have origins in Christopher Hines's former business partnership with Hunter Biden. Isn't that interesting? Hunter Biden's got a business relationship with John Kerry's. Okay. As explained by Reuters, Christopher Hines joined Hunter Biden and Devon Archer. Remember Devon Archer? This Devon Archer was sentenced to prison for fraud. As explained here, Christopher Hines joined Hunter Biden and Devon Archer, one of his classmates at Yale. So he was a classmate with Hunter Biden's business partner in co-founding financial services company Rosemont Seneca Partners in 2009, and that's a company that Hunter Biden, etc., and they set up. Rosemont Seneca, it's like Wolf of Wall Street, wasn't it? What was his name? What was his company name on Wolf of Wall Street? Sounds very familiar to that. Stratton Oakmont, wasn't it? Rosemont Senator. Rosemont Seneca. Yeah. We sell pink sheets. In 2012, Hunter Biden and Archer talked to a Chinese private equity investor, Jonathan Lee, about joining forces on a fund that would invest Chinese capital and possibly capital from other countries outside of China. The New Yorker magazine reported in a profile of Hunter in July 2019. Lee, Archer and others agreed in 2013 to establish the fund called BHR Partners, and Hunter Biden joined as an unpaid member of the board. An archived version of the website says BHR was formed in 2013 by two Chinese asset managers alongside Rosemont Seneca. Okay, so that's where they think this connection has come from. A spokesperson for Christopher Hines says in Hill, March 2018, that Hines had no operating role in Rosemont Seneca and that he had no involvement in any of the firm's dealings in China. By mentioning John Kerry's son, the social media posts lightly conflate Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine with his establishment of BHR Partners. That's what they're saying. This is Reuters saying this, not me. Right? A fund linked to an investment firm. As reported by the Washington Post in September 2019, Archer and Biden's decision to join the board of Burisma in 2014 raised serious concerns for Christopher Hines. Okay. So now the Post are reporting, I think it was the Post, wasn't it, that John Kerry's stepson actually had serious concerns about them joining the board of Burisma, Archer and Biden. So they were both there. For Christopher Hines, who told Archer that joining Burisma was a bad idea due to reports of corruption in Ukraine, geopolitical risks, and general questions about appearance. Chris Bastardi, sorry mate, I shouldn't. I'm such a child. Why do I laugh at that? I'm such a child. Bastardi. Bastardy. A spokesman for Hines told the Post that Hines strongly warned Mr. Archer that working with Burisma was unacceptable. So, according to this John Kerry's stepson, also according to the Washington Post, John Kerry's stepson warned Archer against joining the board of Burisma. Archer was their sort of business associate, him and Hunter Biden. And that the move was a major catalyst for Mr. Hines ending the business relationships with Mr. Archer and Mr. Biden. So that is what Reuters say the John Kerry connection is. And then you got Mitt Romney's sons. And they go on to say here, Mitt Romney's sons all do this, and they say Mitt Romney couldn't find any explanation for posts linking Mitt Romney's son to an energy company. However, I've heard that repeated. I heard that repeated last night on a major outlet that Mitt Romney's son was on the board of a gas company. Although I can't actually find any. Although I haven't really looked that hard because I spent a lot of time looking at the Nancy Pelosi link. This is one of the fact checks. This is the fact check from USA Today. And I picked this just because I did a fact check on USA Today's fact check the other day, and their fact checks are hilarious. So the claim is Nancy Pelosi's son served on a Ukrainian company board with Hunter Biden. That's the claim, all right? That's not the truth. The truth is Nancy Pelosi's son, well, we'll get to the truth in a bit. Throughout Joe Biden's campaign, this is from USA Today back in 2019 rather, the election, 2020 election. 2020, yeah, not 2019. Throughout Joe Biden's campaign, son Hunter Biden's position on a Ukrainian gas company's board of directors has been a popular target for conservative critics. Well, not just conservative critics. Come on. That's a bit conservative critics. Shouldn't everybody be targeting that, whether you're conservative or liberal or what? He gets a discharge from the army because he's failed a drugs test, and then all of a sudden he's $1 million a year on a Ukrainian gas company board. Absolutely no knowledge of Ukrainian gas or fossil fuels or whatever. None. It's great work if you can get it. If you're in America, by the way, and you're listening to this, and you're listening to, you know, how the president's son got $1 million salary for sitting on a board of a Ukrainian company, and how he's, you know, up to his neck in dealings with all sorts of people who are going to prison for fraud, etc., while he's doing business in China and Ukraine and etc. And you're working 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week, or you're working 2 jobs in America, slaving your ass off just to cover the rent. And you're seeing them get $1 million for nothing. And that's just one payment he was getting. Doesn't it make you sick? You know, how do you think capitalism's going? Facebook, a Facebook sign posted on October the 21st read, "Guess whose son is on the Ukrainian board with Biden? Pelosi Jr." No, he wasn't. Meanwhile, the same photo is spreading on Parler, a popular social media platform. So you can see here, USA Today. This is spreading like wildfire, this false claim that he's on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. Okay. They say there's no evidence Pelosi has any relationship with Burisma. All right, okay. But that's not what the claim said, was it? The claim was that he was on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. It wasn't necessarily Burisma. All right. The image is presumably referring to Burisma Holdings, the Ukrainian gas company whose board Hunter Biden sat on from 2014 to 2019. Oh, so he got 5 million quid from it, 4 million quid from it. $4 million. Nice. Nice. Nancy Pelosi's Deputy Chief of Staff, Drew Hamill, told USA Today that claims stating her son served on any Ukrainian board with Biden or had any professional relationship with Burisma were completely false. USA Today could not find any evidence that Paul Pelosi Jr. had professional relationship with Biden, Burisma, or any Ukrainian company. This is not the first time misinformation about Pelosi and Ukraine has raised eyebrows. And they go on down there to say it was a new version of an old claim. But that's it. They just say it's completely false. Nothing to see here. Move on. Not really a fact checker, is it? Because 5 minutes of me looking and I found this from the Mail. Exclusive. Nancy Pelosi's son Paul was involved in 5 companies probed by the feds as a shocking paper trail connects him to a slew of fraudsters and convicted criminals. It's from January 2022. This is recent. I say that again. Nancy Pelosi's son Paul was involved in five companies. 5. Probed by the feds as shocking paper trail connects him to a slew of fraudsters and criminals. He says a shocking paper trail shows Nancy Pelosi's son, Paul Pelosi Jr., connections with a host of fraudsters, rule breakers and convicted criminals. A DailyMail.com investigation can reveal that Paul was involved in 5 companies probed by federal agencies. We know his partner's gone to prison already. Okay, nothing to see here. False. Move on. Fact check done. He joined the board of a biofuel company after it defrauded investors, according to an SEC ruling, and whose CEO was convicted after bribing Georgia officials. He's got some nice friends, hasn't he, Paul Pelosi Jr.? Paul was president of an environmental investment firm that turned out to be a front for 2 convicted fraudsters. He was meant to be running the company. He had nothing to do with it. He was meant to be like, the chairman or something like that. The company. He had nothing to do with it at all. These 2 people convicted of fraud were running the company, basically. He served as vice president of a company previously embroiled in an investigation of scam calls that targeted senior citizens. Of course he was. A medical company Paul Pelosi Jr. worked for was accused of testing drugs on people without FDA authorization. Wow, he's lovely, isn't he? And a source close to a firm Nancy's son worked for told Daily Mail that Pelosi Jr. received $2.8 million of shares allegedly issued as part of a massive $164 million fraud in July 2016. Okay. There's still no evidence he was on the board of a, Ukrainian gas company. Well, this is in the Washington Free Beacon. I'm going to read this article in the Washington Free Beacon. The title of it, if you want to go and look it up, if you're on TikTok, is a company co-founded by Paul Pelosi Jr. charged with securities fraud. This is one of the things we're talking about. The company co-founded by Paul Pelosi Jr. charged with securities fraud. The Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC, charged a company, this is from 2014 by the way, co-founded by Paul Pelosi Jr. with fraud on Wednesday after learning that 2 convicted criminals were running the business. This is what I was talking about just. Paul Pelosi Jr., the son of House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, was the president and chief operating officer of Natural Blue Resources, an investment company he co-founded that focuses on, quote, environmentally friendly ventures. Okay. The SEC charged 4 individuals with fraud, including former Mexico Governor Tony Anaya, and suspended trading in the company's stock. Pelosi owned about 10 million shares in the company in 2009. The SEC said Wednesday the company was secretly controlled by James Cohen and Joseph Carazzi, both of whom had previous fraud convictions. Carazzi violated federal security laws and was barred from acting as an officer or director of a public company. Cohen was previously incarcerated for financial fraud. He's got some bloody wonderful friends, hasn't he? Old Pelosi Jr. He's got some lovely friends. Cohen and Carazzi said they were outside consultants, but according to the SEC, they actually controlled Natural Blue's business decisions without disclosing their past brushes with the law to investors. The pair made hundreds of thousands of dollars off the company. Cohen and Carazzi concealed their involvement through a so-called consultancy agreement, but their influence over the issue was spread much further. Investors in Natural Blue had a right to know who was running the company behind the scenes, said Andrew Chesney, director of the SEC's enforcement division. The SEC suspended trading in Natural Blue stock. Nancy Pelosi's son's, he was the chief operating guy. A notice filed in the Federal Register on Wednesday by Peterson, Assistant Secretary of the SEC, revealed that the company has not filed any periodic reports, which are required by law with the SEC in 4 years. So they haven't filed. They didn't file any reports. He was the CEO of this company. Cohen, Carazzi, Anaya, and Eric Perry a former executive at Natural Blue, were all charged with federal fraud violations. Anaya, who was governor of New Mexico from 83 to 87, and Perry misled investors by failing to disclose that Cohen and Karatzi were running the company. Natural Blue and its officers attempted an end around the rules designed to prevent recidivists from getting their hands on the controls of public companies, said Paul Levinson, the director of the SEC's Boston regional office. While Natural Blue was ostensibly led by Anaya and subsequently Perry, management decisions made by Cohen and Karatzi resulted in no revenues or viable business operations for the company, the SEC said. Anaya and Perry each deferred to Cohen and Karatzi in derogation of their responsibilities. So you can see there, this is just a shell of a hierarchy almost. It's like, okay, this is who's at the top, this is the business structure, I've got him at the top, these are the underlings, no. Those people who are convicted for fraud, who can't run companies, are actually running the whole thing. There is some dispute, however, over Paul Pelosi's current connection to the company. The New Mexico office of the Secretary of State Business Service currently lists Natural Blue as a company not in good standing, with Pelosi listed as its president. Pelosi co-founded the company in 2009. He served as president and chief operating officer of it until 2010. And the Mountain View Telegraph cited Pelosi as Natural Blue's president last year. Anaya, who was one of those other people in that company, will be barred from participating in any penny stock company, so it was penny stock, for at least 5 years and fined an amount to be determined later. Perry also settled with the SEC, agreeing to pay a $150,000 fine and permanently banned from serving as an officer or director of a public company and from participating in any offerings of penny stocks. So all of his friends are criminal, seemingly. You know, this whole, well, you know, what's the Ukraine connection then? You know, it seems that his dealings, he's got some dodgy dealings. What's the Ukraine connection? Well, this article exposed Pelosi Jr. worked in Ukraine with accused fraudster facing prison. Okay, all right. So this article, nationalfile.org, nationalfile.com, it's on. It's not saying that he was on the board of a Ukrainian company, but it is suggesting that there's a Ukraine connection. Okay, now we're getting closer to the truth in our little fact check on the fact checks, isn't it? Pelosi Jr. does business in Ukraine with accused fraudster, it says. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's son, Paul Pelosi Jr., visited Ukraine in 2017 to meet with government officials in connection to a business initiative. Now, National File has learned from overseas. Russia. It's got to be Russia, isn't it? That Pelosi Jr. was in Ukraine representing his business efforts with Asa Sinclair. Okay, that's another name. A close Pelosi friend and self-identified business associate who's been charged by the Department of Justice for wire fraud. Asa Sinclair is under house arrest, facing 20 years in prison. Video evidence proves that Pelosi Jr. was in Ukraine representing his corporate governance initiative. It's interesting, isn't it? Because this fact check here where is it? They mention corporate government initiative. Why haven't they delved a little bit deeper? You know, he's gone to Ukraine. I've got the evidence of it. I'll show you it in a minute. Video evidence proves that Pelosi Jr. was in Ukraine representing his corporate governance initiative and promoting his endorsement from the World Sports Alliance. So now he's not just a penny stock trader and financial whiz and on the board of all sorts of companies and oil companies and what have you, but now he's Now he's a World Sports Alliance expert, which shared leadership staff with Pelosi's company CGI. The World Sports Alliance was Asa Sinclair's front group that is accused of running a criminal cryptocurrency scam known as IJOBIT, as well as international mining operations, including the diamond-rich, war-torn Central African Republic. Paul Pelosi Jr. travelled to Kiev, Ukraine, in July 2017 in his capacity as Executive Director of the Corporate Governance Initiative, a position that he accepted months earlier in 2017. Pelosi Jr. said that he was in Ukraine to discuss a youth soccer partnership with the government. Then led by former Ukraine President Poroshenko. The American Mirror, which flagged Pelosi's appearance in 2017, preserved a clip of Pelosi. And I've got a clip for you here. It's on YouTube. Here's Paul Pelosi Jr. in Ukraine in 2017. He's here to talk about soccer.
Hello, I'm Alex Gupta with UATV. Today I'm speaking with Paul Pelosi Jr. He is a San Francisco-based investor and corporate finance expert, and also happens to be the son of Nancy Pelosi.
By the way, this guy on Ukrainian TV, he's got a real Ukrainian accent, hasn't he? Did you notice that? This is meant to be Ukrainian TV. He's got a hell of a Ukrainian accent, hasn't he? Do you think this is do you think this station that they're broadcasting from has maybe got some of the $5 billion in funding, or some of the other funding that's found its way to Ukraine in the years after, to prop this station up? The pro-Ukrainian government and having Nancy...
Hello, I'm Alex Gupta with UATV. Today I'm speaking with Paul Pelosi Jr. He is a San Francisco-based investor and corporate finance expert, and also happens to be the son of Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader of the United States House of Representatives. Hello, Mr. Pelosi. Welcome to UATV.
Thank you, Alex. A pleasure to be here.
What brings you to Kiev?
Kiev's a wonderful time of year. I'm here with the Corporate Governance Initiative, and today we're here to talk about soccer. We recently got an endorsement from...
Today we're here to talk about soccer. Oh!
World Sports Alliance, and we've spoken with the Ukraine government about collaboration for soccer for young people. You know, Ukraine's got a great history in soccer, and we hope to share in that tradition going forward.
What is Nancy Pelosi's son doing on Ukrainian TV talking about a partnership between his company and the Ukrainian government in some soccer stuff? What is it all about? What are they doing? Because I guarantee you, the end game here is not to get Ukraine to the final of the UEFA World Cup. Although they've got a better chance now, they've banned Russia. They're like a box of rats, these people. Just climbing all over each other.
So you have a corporate governance business, and you're here in Ukraine speaking with representatives from the government, investment bankers, discussing certain things related to soccer.
Exactly. The Corporate Governance Initiative, what we do is we work with people to kind of bring people together.
He's a hell of a public speaker, isn't he, this guy? Listen to this sentence. Listen to this sentence. He's a hell of a public speaker.
Initiative, what we do is we work with people to kind of bring people together, a spirit of cooperation. And sometimes religion and politics can get tricky, but sports is an area where people seem to have a good, competitive, healthy relationship.
So yeah, so he's gone in with soccer. So right, okay. So he's done politics. His mom's in politics. He doesn't want to bother with religion. Soccer. I know, soccer. Let's go for soccer. That's safe, isn't it? Let's talk about soccer.
And so it's a pleasure to be here and to meet with the people of Ukraine and to meet the young kids that are very enthusiastic about their athletic futures.
What are your thoughts? This is your first visit to Ukraine, I imagine?
Yes, this is my first visit here with the Corporate Governance Initiative.
Oh, did you hear that? Did you hear that? He said, is it your first visit to Ukraine? And he said, yes, this is my first visit with the Corporate Governance Initiative. So is it your first visit, Nancy Pelosi's son? Listen, that sounds like something you would say if the answer was no. Listen.
Futures.
What are your thoughts? This is your first visit to Ukraine, I imagine?
Yes, this is my first visit here with the Corporate Governance Initiative.
What is your thoughts? What are your...
Mate, come on. This is your first time here, yes? It's my first time here with the Corporate Governance Initiative. It's dodgy.
Impressions of Ukraine?
Well, Kiev is a wonderful town. It's deep in history. They tell me it's 500 years older than Moscow, and there's a great pride with the people, very smart people. And you get a sense of optimism in the street after 2 years of conflict that you read about in the papers, and after you read about all this currency issues. It seems you have a sense of calm and a sense of optimism that was quite refreshing, that you may not have got.
So there's Nancy Pelosi. There's Nancy Pelosi's son, Paul Pelosi Jr.
Scooped it with UATV.
In Ukraine,
Today I'm speaking
in
with Paul
2017,
Pelosi Jr.
talking to Ukrainian TV about soccer. But American politicians had nothing to do with what was going on in Ukraine and what have you. There was no corruption there at all. Just dodgy, that is. When somebody asks you, it's your first time, and you say, it's my first time with this company, that sounds like you're covering up for something. I just want to show you this from the Washington Post as well. So, I mean, Nancy Pelosi's son, that Viscoil, by the way, that he was a partner of, I've checked and they did have dealings in Ukraine. For some reason, I haven't got that slide loaded right now, so I can't show you it. But that Viscoil did do, his son, Nancy Pelosi's son, did do dealings with Ukraine. And I've just showed he's in Ukraine on Ukrainian TV in 2017 talking about some soccer initiative that he's doing with his company, the CGI. This is on from Washington Post as well. This is talking about Hunter Biden's foray into Ukraine. It's quite interesting, this is. And I know this is going back to the Biden thing, and I was talking about Pelosi, but from the Washington Post, they say this. Now, you can see how they're presenting this in the nicest way possible, because they're talking about Hunter Biden and his problems. And they say this about Biden, about Hunter. Their family has been tested by tragedy. Hunter Biden survived a 1972 car accident that killed his mother and sister. Obviously, that is true. We did, if you didn't know about that, it is true. His brother Beau, who also survived, died of cancer in 2015. So you can see they're sort of, they're laying the groundwork to say, listen, there's tragedy here in the family. And Hunter Biden has struggled with addiction and financial difficulties in recent years, according to filings from his 2017 divorce. Yeah, there's been lots said about Hunter Biden's, struggle with drugs. That's not the reason to hate the guy. That's not a reason to distrust the guy or anything. Drugs problems can happen to anybody. I don't feel less. I don't feel less of Hunter Biden because he's a self-confessed recovering drug addict. At all. I don't feel bad about him because of that whatsoever. I feel bad about him because his whole family are corrupt and they're on the take. That's why. And it's plain to see here. During Ukraine's political upheaval in 2014, the Yale law graduate was an unpaid chairman of the board of the World Food Programme USA, a partner in an investment firm called Rosemont Seneca, as we've just explained, and a counsel for the New York firm Bose Schiller Flexner. One of the investment company partners, Devon Archer, had just joined the board of Burisma. Soon, Hunter Biden received his invitation. Another partner in their investment firm raised serious concerns. So this is where the Hines things come from. This is where Kerry's stepson comes from. And I think this is where the confusion is. Chris Hines, Kerry's stepson, told Archer that joining Burisma was a bad idea, according to a spokesman. So that's where Reuters have got this part of the conversation from, this part of the story from in their fact check. One of his investment company partners, Devon Archer, sorry, just said that, haven't I? Quote, Mr. Hines strongly warned Mr. Archer that working with Burisma was unacceptable. He stated that he and Hunter had intended to pursue the opportunity as individuals, not as part of a firm. Hines spokesman Chris Bastardi, I'm going to laugh every time I say that. Chris Bastardi told the Post. That decision fractured the firm. The lack of judgment, so their sort of firm that they had, the lack of judgment in this matter was a major catalyst for Mr. Hines ending his business relationships with Mr. Archer and Mr. Biden. So it looks like, to me at least, if somebody can point me to anything else, that John Kerry's stepson, the allegations that he was on the board of Burisma are untrue. I can't see anything myself, and it does look like this is where it comes from because his stepson had a partnership with them. That's where that comes from. The spokesman for Hines, Mr. Bastardi, said the lack of judgment in this matter was a major catalyst for Mr. Hines ending his business relationships. But, and this is why I came back to this, there's another little bit piece of this puzzle. Washington Post again. By 2015, frustration was mounting in Kiev over the slow efforts by the Western-leaning President Poroshenko to stamp out corruption. Is there any wonder that he can't stamp out corruption when the Americans have all brought their family members into this on board? Anyway, journalists and their sons are on Ukrainian TV saying, "Look, we're going to invest in soccer." Yeah, you got any neo-Nazis anywhere I can have a chat with? Anyway, journalists in Ukraine were documenting the enormous wealth enjoyed by former government officials such as Zlochevsky, at one point flying drones to film two side-by-side mansions outside Kiev registered to his family and associates. His daughter promoted a new luxury store in Kiev named Zloty, a play on his name, that was offering crocodile, alligator and ostrich shoes such as Ukrainians faced a biting recession, it says. During a 2015 speech before the Ukrainian parliament, Biden called for the country to root out the corruption. This is Joe Biden. And he said, quote, "The office of the general prosecutor desperately needs reform." Biden later recounted telling Poroshenko, more bluntly, that the United States would withhold $1 billion loan guarantee if action was not taken against Shokin, this prosecutor who was, he was investigating Burisma for... He was investigating what's his name? Zlochevsky, who was sort of the head guy at Burisma. He was investigating them for fraud and all sorts of financial misdoings. And there's Biden saying, no, we're gonna withhold this $1 billion loan guarantee if this prosecutor who's investigating Burisma carries on. I looked at them. He said, this is Biden's own word. You've probably seen this speech, but it's actually on YouTube. You can see it. I looked at them and said, quote, "I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money." That's what he said before the CFR. Quote, "Well, son of a bitch, he got fired and they put in place someone who was solid at the time." So you can see there Biden's got somebody who was investigating Burisma fired in 2015. Shokin, who was provided information about Biden to Giuliani. We all know that this is what they impeached Trump over. Yeah, they didn't impeach him over anything else, but he went after one of their own. You can't do that. told the Post earlier this year that he believes he was ousted, this Shokin, he believes he was ousted in March 2016 because he was investigating Burisma. He said that's why. Whereas Biden said he's got to go for another reason. Biden, whose son was on the board at Burisma, getting $1 million a year in payments. If he had been allowed to remain in the job, he said he would have questioned Hunter Biden's qualifications to be a board member, noting that this person had no work experience in Ukraine or in the energy sector. No, but he did fail a drug test in the army, so that's worth $1 million of any energy company's money, isn't it? Surely. No, it's not, and don't call me Shirley. But at the time, the Zlochevsky case was dormant, according to former Ukrainian and US officials. I want to go back to this, having showed you all that and all the. Just bear me a second. Sorry about that, my dog was playing up. I mean, this fact check by Reuters, they said it was partly false. This article, partly false. All of the other fact checks that they listed there, you know, I think I showed the USA Today one, didn't I? They just said, yeah, it's totally false. But you can see there they're actually taking something that they know is false, presenting that as the claim that's being made and saying, yes, that's false, without actually telling people, oh, well, that's false, yeah, but he was on Ukrainian TV in 2017 with his CGI promoting some soccer stuff. What's all that about? I really don't think that these fact checks should be called partly false. You know? Partly false could mean 99% true, couldn't it? You know, they get their fact checks, these companies do, and they're like Snopes. They love putting false pants on fire, but they're taking extreme views that somebody is saying on Facebook to try and squelch a fire out, to try and put a fire out. You know, this is why I say they're not the fourth estate. They're not real journalists. They're actually running interference and propping up power rather than holding it to account. Where the Mitt Romney thing comes from in this, you can see there Mitt Romney, John Kerry, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden. Where that comes from, I don't know. So if anybody can point me to that, I'd appreciate it. I heard the claim made again last night, really quite blatantly. Yeah, John Kerry's son is on the board. I heard them say that, but I can't find it myself. But I can find a shitload of smoke when it comes to Nancy Pelosi's son. And that guy looks dodgy as a 5-bob note. Let me know what you think. You know, but he's on the board of companies where there's lots of fraudulent activity going on, and he doesn't seem to have a clue about any of it. But he keeps getting high-profile jobs. You know, keeps getting CEOs of all these companies doing contracts in Ukraine, etc. But he doesn't know what's going on in his own companies. Something smells extremely fishy to me. Doesn't it smell fishy to you here? I'm going to be looking into this more and more. But beware of fact checks that say partly false. Because the chances are what they actually mean is mostly true. Or There's a lot of smoke over here. There's a hell of a lot of smoke. There's got to be a fire somewhere because there's smoke all over the place. Isn't that fairer than saying partly false in that instance? I don't know. There's something else I wanted to talk about today. And this is just very quickly. Personal. Other bookmark. No. Sorry, I've just got to find my bookmarks. I can't find the bookmarks. Ah! Recently bookmarked. Where is it? There it is. So Bill Gates, who, apparently he's in charge of global health. You know, let's put the Microsoft guy in charge of global health, shall we? Who decided that, by the way? Who decided Microsoft guy was going to be in charge of the pandemic? Anyway, he was in Munich, and he made a speech about the latest with Omicron. And he said this, and loads of people are talking about it, and I'm not surprised. Take a listen to what he says here. It's quite scary.
To kick off, actually, and get a bit of a scene setter from Mr. Gates, because this is, I know, a topic that you've spoken on again and again. You were ahead of the curve prior to the beginning of this pandemic. Where would you assess where we are today in beating COVID-19?
So the question, where would you assess we are today with regards to beating COVID-19? Okay? That's the question.
Beginning of this pandemic, where would you assess where we are today in beating COVID-19?
Well, sadly, the virus itself, particularly the variant called Omicron, is a type of vaccine. That is, it creates both B-cell and T-cell immunity.
He said there, I will repeat it for you, I'll play it again, but he specifically said, sadly, Omicron is a vaccine. And sadly, it's done a better job of getting this vaccine to the world than our vaccine. Why is that sad? Can we listen to it again?
Today in beating COVID-19.
Well, sadly, the virus itself, particularly the variant called Omicron, is a type of vaccine. That is, it creates both B-cell and T-cell immunity. And it's done a better job of getting out to the world population than we have with vaccines. If you do surveys in African countries, you get well over 80% of people have been exposed either to the vaccine or to various variants. And so, what that does is it means the chance of severe disease, which is mainly associated with being elderly and having obesity or diabetes, those risks are now dramatically reduced.
So he's explaining there those risks as a result of Omicron being mild and being more transmissible and acting more like a vaccine and actually giving you better immunity than a vaccine, according to studies I've heard. One saying 70 times. Don't know how much that's true, but 80% of Africa has now been vaccinated against the virus as a result of this. So why is that bad? I'll play the whole thing all the way through without stopping. I don't understand why this is sadly and why this is bad.
Well, sadly, the virus itself, particularly the variant called Omicron, is a type of vaccine. That is, it creates both B cell and T cell immunity. And it's done a better job of getting out to the world population than we have with vaccines. If you do sero surveys in African countries, you get well over 80% of people have been exposed either to the vaccine or to various variants. And so, you know, what that does is it means the chance of severe disease, which is mainly associated with being elderly and having obesity or diabetes, those risks are now dramatically reduced because of that infection exposure. And, you know, it's sad. We didn't do a great job on therapeutics. You know, only here, 2 years in, do we have a good therapeutic. Vaccines, it took us 2 years to be in oversupply. Today, there are more vaccines than there is demand for vaccines. And, you know, that wasn't true. And next time we should try and make it, instead of 2 years, we should make it more like 6 months, which certainly, you know, some of the standardized platform approaches, including mRNA, would allow us to do that. So, you know, it took us a lot longer this time than it should have.
So, if Omicron dramatically reduces severe illness as a result of coronavirus, that's good, isn't it? But he said that's sadly. How are you looking at this? Do you think he's looking at this as, oh, okay, that's good, you know, people's health is most important? Or do you think he's looking at this as, oh, we're making $1,000 a second on these vaccines? Because that's what it seems like to me. I would love to ask him that, and I think a lot of people are asking, why did he say sadly there? You know, I suppose there's an argument to say he said sadly because, you know, we didn't get the vaccines out as quick as the Omicron got it out. Sadly, you know, humans aren't as quick as nature. I don't know. Maybe he meant it in that way. But it is a really odd choice of words. Don't you agree? For him to say sadly, the Omicron variant is, well, it's helping. Maybe you can explain why the Microsoft guy, well, who's one of the richest people on the planet, seems to be more motivated by money than health and profit. One last thing to talk about. I've been going over 2 hours. Over 2 hours. Hi everybody on TikTok, if you're still there. Yeah, you're still there with me. Thank you. Bill Gates wants to lower the world's population, just like most of the 1%, says Kelso James. Okay. Does he? I don't know. Gordon, you're a fascist, says Jimmy Toronto. Okay, mate. I'm a fascist. All right. Okay. Yeah. You're a troll. Right. Last thing I want to talk about tonight. I just talk about this quickly because I have been live now for 2 hours. But there's one last thing I want to talk about because I touched on this earlier. I don't know whether you can hear me, but my dog is growling at me here. She's like literally going, I want to go. Come here. Come on, up here. Sorry, she wants attention. I think she wants to go out, so I'm going to have to make this quick. Go and lie down. Go and lie down. You can have 5 minutes. Go and lie down. Go on. Sorry about this. This is the joys of independent media, I'm afraid. So, I touched on this earlier, but I want to go into it more and just talk about it a little bit because, like I say, YouTube have said it's blocking Russia's state-run RT and Sputnik news outlets from Europe 6 days after Russian President Vladimir Putin launched an invasion of Ukraine. So YouTube are blocking RT and they're blocking Sputnik. there's this is really worrying everybody, because like I say, I've had a couple of little things, jobs for RT in the past that have done work for them. They've picked up a few of my videos in the past, nothing for a good 8 months or so. Wasn't expecting to do any more work for them, so it's not like I'm being biased here. I have been paid for them, I'm not paid at the time, but I've been pretty invested in the news over the last 4 or 5 years, and I've got to tell you, of all the outlets of all the legacy outlets, of all the state-run media outlets out there, BBC, I include in that, I guess it is state-run, RT has been the best. It's certainly been the most truthful. We wouldn't even have these pictures of Julian Assange being dragged out of the embassy if it wasn't for Rupley, RT's video channel. That's RT, that is Rupley. When WikiLeaks put out the message a few years ago, they put out the call to arms that Julian was going to get dragged from his asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. I got an email from somebody the other side of the world to say, we've just had this message. And I booked a train and I got down there the next day. And I was down there for a good 3-4 days, I think. And I had to come home in the end because I've got a dog. As you've seen, I had to relieve the person who was seeing her. Now, when I got there, all the media were there at the time. All of them. It's one of the few occasions, one of the very seldom occasions that the BBC, The Guardian, everybody were there. And they all turned up. WikiLeaks have never lied to us. Everything that they've said has happened, is going to happen or will happen. And they said he was going to get dragged out the embassy. Our media went home. They all went home. I was there, and there were people who were there with me will back me up. They were complaining about their feet being cold. And they were complaining that, he should go to Sweden to face charges over there. There were never any charges in Sweden. But if it wasn't for Rupley, if it wasn't for RT, we wouldn't have these pictures of him being dragged out of the embassy in that act of fascism on home soil in the middle of London. Clutching that book by Gore Vidal, The History of the National Security State. Shouting the words, the UK has no sovereignty. He wasn't saying he wasn't saying Sweden's all a hoax. He wasn't saying I'm not a sexual predator or whatever. He wasn't saying any of that. He was saying the UK has no sovereignty. And we wouldn't know about it if it wasn't for RT. The most important, I consider, political prisoner on the planet right now. I know I could go through any number of huge stories here. And obviously we got the stories with the Skripals, etc. There was a lot of propaganda surrounding that, I know. But I'd trust anything that RT was saying there over anything that the BBC was saying there, because they were changing their story every 5 minutes when it came to the Skripals. And you've got to wonder, are they banning RT and Sputnik here because they're saying that they're producing lies? Because I can't come up with many instances where I can prove that RT were factually incorrect over the last 4 or 5 years, but I could point to hundreds where the BBC were factually wrong, and many of them, I would say that they were doing it on purpose. I can't say that to RT. Sputnik, I can maybe point to one article that I got burned by as well. It wasn't them. It was a Ronaldo one about Palestine, which ended up being fake. But other than that, I certainly can't think of any times where they're maliciously telling a lie. But I can with our media. So it makes me wonder, are they trying to shut RT and Sputnik up because they're fake news? Or are they trying to shut them up because they tell the truth? I know which one it's more likely to be. And when I see Ursula von der Leyen saying you've got to stop Putin's propaganda machine, I start looking over at America, and I start looking at CNN and MSNBC, and start looking at all the lies that they've told over the last 4 or 5 years when it came to Russiagate. Oh, the walls are closing in on Trump is a puppet of Vladimir Putin. Give it a rest. Give it a rest. Seriously. Grow up. Yeah, that's all Rachel Maddow could talk about for 4 years. She was the #1 news show in America. That's all she could talk about. Was the power was going to go poof in Fargo because of Vladimir Putin. It was preposterous. But I don't see any of them being shut down by the EU because of spreading their propaganda. Do you? I'm going to point you to the biggest piece of propaganda horse manure ever. And it's not from RT. It's from The Guardian, and it's this one. Manafort held secret talks with Assange in Ecuadorian embassy. Sources say they had to add that sources say onto this article. It's been stealth edited multiple times, this article has. I'll scroll down to the bottom, look, see if they've put any notice that it's been, look, no notice whatsoever that this article has been altered. It's been altered multiple times, including the headline. That's called stealth editing. It was written by 2 different people, and the third one, some propagandist in Ecuador who's extremely dodgy, didn't even put his name on the web version. It was on the print version, but not the web. This is the biggest pile of lies you have ever seen. Manafort held talks with Assange in Ecuadorian embassy. This is the most surveilled premises on the planet. And they're saying somehow he got in there and out several times without anybody seeing him, without any footage whatsoever, him bypassing all the security, signing in and out. And they write this. This is still up. It's not been retracted. Everybody knows it's false. Everybody. Even people in The Guardian won't link to it. And even Luke Harding, the propagandist who was one of the authors of this article, won't even mention it in his new book on Putin and Russiagate. He won't even link to his own article. So why are we banning Russia and not The Guardian? Now, I'm not saying we should ban The Guardian too. I've never called for the banning of The Guardian. The Guardian, they should take this pile of crap down because it's lies and it's fake news. But they shouldn't be banned. But if you're going to ban RT for propaganda and lies, then The Guardian have got to be next, haven't they? If you're being consistent. And if you're not being consistent, I want to know why you're banning RT and Sputnik. Because that, like I say, suggests to me you're not worried about the lies that they're going to tell. You're worried about the truth they're going to expose. Whenever censorship happens, it's because of fear. And you're afraid of something over there in the EU. I do hope we don't follow suit in the UK, because I've got a feeling we probably already have and I haven't heard of it yet. Alright, that's what I wanted to mention on that. There's so many other instances I could pick on. Honestly, you can go back. I've got hundreds of videos on YouTube explaining just all the lies that have been told in the media over the last 4 or 5 years. And hardly any of them have come from Russia. Hardly any of them. They've all come from Western outlets. All of the lies and propaganda I've exposed has come from Western outlets, yet they're shutting down Russia and saying that Russia's spreading lies. What are they hiding? What are they not telling you? What do they want to stop RT and Sputnik telling you? Because it's not what they're going to be telling people that support them. No. It's what they fear that Russia today is going to be telling people who are on the other side, in the other countries. They're scared of it. And we know they're lying. We know these people are lying, these Western leaders. We know they are. So what are you trying to hide? If wars can be started with lies, peace can be started by the truth. Yeah, let's go to do the let's do the super chats, and then I shall quit this. Thanks very much for hanging on and sticking with me, everybody. If you're there on the TikTok, and I can see there's a few people on there. Thanks for everybody for sticking on me through this. I hope you enjoyed it. I wish there was a way I could figure out how to live stream sort of what everybody sees on YouTube and Rockfin and Rungball, etc. the same on TikTok. Hopefully that'll change. There's a game changer on TikTok though, people are not aware of, and they're going to allow me to load longer videos now. They're not limiting me to 3 minutes. So bye YouTube, I suppose. I mean, no point in me being on YouTube if that's the case, is it? Yeah. Although it is convenient for some people, so I understand. That's why I do. I have why I do still go live on YouTube, because I know it's convenient for some people. Oh, thank you from Ukraine, from Russia. Thank you. Oh, thanks. Everybody's so nice. I'm going to start getting a bigger head. Right. Supers. Okay. Are these all tonight? No, that was the other night. Matt Blunt, Fresh Orange, £10. Thank you. Okay, summer of 1970. Thank you for the super chat. The Dulles brothers brought the Third Reich back to the USA after World War II, and now they control the MI6. The Dulles brothers have been dead for some time. If people don't know who the Dulles brothers are, I suggest you go and watch Oliver Stone's sort of like 10-part series. The untold history of the United States. That'll give you a good idea as to who the Dulles brothers are. One Dulles brother was the Secretary of State. One Dulles brother. I can't remember which one now. This is going back to the late 1940s, early 1950s, when at the inception of the CIA. One Dulles brother was the Secretary of State. The other one was the head of the CIA. The one of them was heavily involved as well in the report on Lee Harvey Oswald, and that's dodgy, with the JFK assassination. That was I don't know which Dulles the brother that was, but they basically invented sort of the brinksmanship that you see with America now. You know, America's whole foreign policy is we will make out that we will go much further than we're prepared to go. It's all brinksmanship. We will say we're going much further, and it's up to you whether you'll believe us or not, you know? And that foreign policy is, you can see it in their foreign policy today. Very similar. As for the Third Reich, well, we know that many Nazis came to America and South America after World War II. So you're spot on, summer of 1970, I'd say. Rob Juno, thank you for the chat, Canadians. Good luck in your protests. Thank you, Gordo. Screw Trudeau. Thank you, Rob. And Kathy Lloyd, thank you very much again for the donation. Just because I think you're awesome, she says. I think you're awesome too, Kathy. And Darren Levy, thank you for the super chat as well. He said the censorship thugs have banned RT on YouTube. Couldn't access it earlier. Yeah, they've banned RT. Sadly, it looks like the UK establishment want to make Truss the next Prime Minister. It's Liz Truss as Prime Minister. How can the world take us serious? I don't want to be horrible to Liz Truss, because I'm sure it's not nice being the butt of the jokes that she's the butt of, but we've got to do better than this. Don't you agree, everybody? We've got to do better than this. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. For everybody on YouTube and Rockfin and Rumble and Twitter and TikTok. Thanks very much. Thank you very much for all the super chats. Thanks for all the chat. I'm going to go back and I'm going to look through all these comments and maybe do some videos about them. And I'll be back tomorrow. Please subscribe. Please support independent media. Ignore the propaganda and check everything. Other than that, read the whole article, not just the headline. There you go. There's some advice for you all. Thanks very much, everybody. I shall be back in the next day or two. Subscribe on TikTok. Go to the website. Sign up to the mailing list. You'll get an email an hour before I go live next time, so you'll get a nice heads up. So thanks very much, everybody. I'm going to get off now. There is a... I think I can... I saw something. If anybody sent me anything on... oh, I've got gifters. Yeah, I've got gifters on... I've got diamonds and what have you on. So thank you for all the people who've sent me diamonds on TikTok as well. That's very kind of you. All right, everybody. That's me out. Stop the war. Stop the wars. And free Julian Assange. That's all really I want to say. Take care, everybody. I love you all. Me and Ellie are going to say goodbye. Come here, then. Say goodbye. Yeah, she wants to go out. Take care, everybody. Peace. Love you all. All right, that's it, everybody. Thank you. I'm out. The live stream's finished now. I'm going to go and let my doggy out. And, yeah.